गुड मॉर्निंग एवरीवन। मेरा नाम आशीष है और मैं मैश प्रोजेक्ट फाउंडेशन का फाउंडर और सीईओ हूँ। आज एक बहुत ही खास दिन है और सबको मेरी तरफ से स्वतंत्र दिवस की बहुत बहुत हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं। विश यू ऑल अ वेरी वेरी हैप्पी इंडिपेंडेंस डे। What could be a better way to celebrate India's 75th Independence Day to without not talking about its rich history and culture that we have had over the last 75 years. आज मेरे साथ कुछ यंग हिस्टोरियंस, यंग राइटर्स, ऑथर्स आज जुड़ने वाले हैं जो इसी विषय पे अपने विचार रखने वाले हैं, अपने थॉट्स रखने वाले हैं कि किस तरीके से हम पिछले 75 साल में कितनी दूर आ गए हैं। बट आज से आगे जब हम अपने फ्यूचर की तरफ देखते हैं, यूथ को इंस्पायर करते हैं और इस हिस्ट्री और कल्चर को आगे एक तरीके से बढ़ाने का उसको आगे ले जाने का जो हमने एक प्रयास करेंगे, उसको किस तरीके से हम मिलके कर सकते हैं। तो प्लीज जॉइन मी इन वेलकम फॉर मॉडरेटर फॉर टुडे, मिस शारिका परमार। Sharika is an alternate educator and she is a research scholar. She has done her MA in Modern History from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and she's also done extensive research on this topic, and somebody who's very very passionate about history and culture. So Sharika, thank you for joining us today, and I'll now leave you to welcome our panelist.
Thank you, Ashish. A very good morning to our audience and a very happy Independence Day. MASH and Dailyhunt have brought us together on this occasion for a conversation on Indian history, heritage, and culture. And I am really pleased to welcome our panelists for the day. First, we have Mr. Manimukta S. Sharma. He's been a journalist in New Delhi and occupied editorial positions at leading national dailies from the Times of India and Hindustan Times to the Indian Express. He is the author of the 2019 book Allahu Akbar, Understanding the Great Mughal in Today's India. He is pursuing a PhD in history at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. Welcome, Mr. Manimukta.
Thank you very much. And it's my pleasure to be on this platform, and I wish all the viewers and everyone in India a very happy 75th Independence Day. We have come a long way and hope we will go and achieve greater heights in the years to come. सबको एक बार फिर से मुबारकबाद देना चाहूँगा। सभी जिंदा रहें, आबाद रहें और मुल्क में अमन और खुशहाली रहे हमेशा।
Thank you. Next, we have Amy Singh. She's a spoken word poet, an alternative educator, a Punjabi, a reader, and a writer. She's the founder of Dark to Lahore with Love, Cross Connection Poetry, and a partition podcast, Agla Varka, which attempts to turn a new leaf in the story of our great separation. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, Sharika. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. So happy to be here and wishing you and my country people a very happy Independence Day. And like they say, that with freedom comes a great responsibility. And I hope we take this responsibility and really make our country proud, inclusive, and peaceful going forward.
Thank you, Amy. And finally, we have Ishan Sharma. He's the founder of Karwan Heritage, an independent student-led heritage exploration initiative that aims to revive the love for India's heritage and history, especially among young minds. He also authored a book at the age of 16 titled The Teacher I Never Met, and has been a writer since the age of 11. A history buff, and often to be found reading nonfiction, he says. So welcome, Ishan.
Thank you so much, Sharika. Thank you so much, Mash and Dailyhunt, for inviting and curating this panel. और सभी को आज़ादी मुबारक और आज़ादी के अमृत महोत्सव की भी हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं।
Thank you, Ishan. And we're ready with our conversation, ready to head into this conversation today, where have the pleasure of inviting my panelists and the audience to ponder with us the question of, is history alive? If so, how is that? How does the past live on amongst us? Why is it important for us to engage with our histories and heritage, not only as we try to understand the society that we live in, our country, but also ourselves? I would love for all my panelists to please join me in this conversation with a brief introduction, just a little bit about what brought you to your ventures, what brought you to writing your books, to starting these initiatives, and give us a glimpse into your personal connection with Indian history and culture. Mr. Manimukta, would you like to go first and tell us what brought you to writing Allahu Akbar? Why understanding the great Mughal in today's times? Especially the title, I found very curious, very interesting, because it talks about not just the past, but how we're relating to it in our present.
Yeah, well, I actually never thought that I'll write a book on Akbar. Maybe I would have written a book on the Mughals, but that might have been a work on the Mughal military system, the system of warfare, and so on, because I'm primarily interested in that sort of a history. But um, things became such because everyone started talking about history rather aggressively in recent years, and it became uh, important to correct certain perspectives and certain ideas and imaginations of the past. Therefore, I wanted to respond to a lot of angry noises that we hear around the Mughals, but particularly about Akbar, because when I was growing up, and Akbar was seen as this king exemplar who was, who had this very larger than life image. But then we were contrasted at a very different sort of an image where almost he was irredeemable in so many ways. After 2014, 15, that was a period when a lot of social media became very active, and then people started pushing a very negative idea about the Mughals. So I thought it was important to correct the view, or at least intervene in a scholarly manner, and look at what the evidence says, and look how this image of Akbar and the Mughals has transformed over the years. So how Akbar was looked at in his own lifetime, and how after that period, when he was gone, when the Mughals were still very strong, for instance, in the 17th, 18th centuries, and how it started changing 19th century onwards, and 20th century was a different ballgame altogether. So this was really my motivation. I didn't think that I would write a book on Akbar. But then when I wrote a book on Akbar, I was thinking how to place it, because there's a lot of academic writing on the Mughals and Akbar, especially from the Aligarh school, and there have been other historians as well. So it was different and very difficult to come up with something new. So I thought, why not look at him from a very modern perspective? So why don't we to answer some of these questions that have arisen in our modern times? So why don't we look at him from a very modern point of view, how he measures up when we look at the evidence as a king. So that was pretty much the motivation. And once I wrote a book on him, it became important to stay on with history, even though my background has always been that. But after this book, I think I decided that I need to pursue this in a bit more serious manner, which is why I'm here and doing what I'm doing right now. So history for me has been an inspiring thing, and I have, you know, I thought there are so many stories that are left to be told. So why not explore some of that in a more scholarly manner? So that's why I'm here doing what I'm doing. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And your comments about how you wanted to respond, how you wanted um, to have a conversation is something I feel that ties all of us together. Amy, would you want to tell us about why and how Dark came in? Why these letters? And was it to start a conversation?
Sure. So I think it was December 2016. बहुत ही ठंडी सी एक रात थी और मैं एक आर्टिकल पढ़ रही थी न्यूज़पेपर में कि चंडीगढ़ में एक बिरयानी जॉइंट का नाम लाहौर चौक से बदलकर लखनऊ चौक रख दिया है. Why? Because there's been some tension as always on the border, and perhaps the owner wanted to, show his disagreement with Pakistan, or he was just pressured into it because the people would object to the name Lahore Chowk. I don't know what exactly was the reason, but when I read that article, I felt really, really cold, chilly, and sad. मुझे ऐसे लगा कि किसी ने मेरी आइडेंटिटी पर सवाल उठाया है, किसी ने मेरा नाम बदलने की कोशिश की है. एंड आई हैव नो आंसर्स टू व्हाई आई फील अबाउट लाहौर दैट वे. इट्स बीन देयर सिंस फॉरएवर. बचपन से ही whenever I hear the word Lahore or I see it written somewhere, there is a pull that I feel towards the sound of the name Lahore. And मुझे बहुत बुरा लगा और I was crying. And now, because I am a poet and I'm a writer, my go-to place for understanding what's going on with me or around me is always to put my pen to the paper. So I ended up writing a letter to Lahore, and I never even planned to do so. I didn't know that that's what I was heading to when I picked up my pen and paper. I just started writing, and it turns out to be a letter where I'm asking Lahore, how are you feeling? Because it's getting really cold because of all the hatred around me. Is it how you feel too? And I think that was the beginning. And then came 2019 when I posted one of the letters that I've written to Lahore, and it went to places, it went to people all over the world, and till date it has its own life. It inspires people to write their own letters of love and harmony to Lahore and send it to GPO Lahore. It inspires people to sort of, look within their hearts and see if there is a possibility of bridging these gaps between us, of any kind of peace and harmony between us. So this is how Dark started. And Agla Barka, the Partition podcast, started because I have observed in my very limited, because it's a very personal point of view, so it's also limited, that in my very limited understanding of the world around me, जो मुझे लगता है कि मेरी जनरेशन के लोग हैं, पार्टीशन के बाद तीसरी पीढ़ी है जो, वो कहीं ना कहीं पार्टीशन से दूर होती जा रही है. एक तरफ हमारे पास सच में अब फाइनली देयर इज़ अ पीस ऑफ लिटरेचर वर्क, रिसर्च जो पार्टीशन पर हो रहा है, बट एट द सेम टाइम वी लिव इन अ वेरी इंस्टेंट ग्रेटिफिकेशन वाले ज़माने में, जहाँ पर किसी के पास इतना टाइम नहीं है कि वो डीपली किसी चीज़ को पढ़े अनलेस दे रियली go out for it. तो मुझे लगा कि podcast, because it's a secondary medium of consumption, knowledge or information, it is very important that the dialogue around partition and a possibility of harmony and peace between India and Pakistan, इसका जो एक बातचीत है इसके बारे में, वो एक पॉडकास्ट के मीडियम पर भी होनी चाहिए. होती है, देर आर मैनी अमेजिंग चैनल्स जो पार्टीशन के ऊपर बात करते हैं, बट देर इज़ नो वन चैनल और पॉडकास्ट विच इज़ डेडिकेटेड टू द थीम ऑफ पार्टीशन. सो आई थॉट दैट Paulo Freire कहते हैं कि to dismantle any kind of hierarchy, a dialogue has to be started. So this is a step into starting that dialogue about partition. और जैसे अमृता प्रीतम ने कहा है कि आज आखां बारिश शानू की तो कब्रां विचों बोल ते अज किताबे इश्क दा कोई अगला वर्का फोल. सो इस इश्क की किताब जिसमें हमने ऐसी ग्रेट सेपरेशन बर्दाश्त की, एक जुदाई बर्दाश्त की, उसमें अगर हम अब नया पन्ना खोलते हैं, वी गो टू द नेक्स्ट पेज, व्हाट डू वी फाइंड, वेयर डू वी वांट टू गो. सो दैट्स अ सॉर्ट ऑफ डायलॉग एंड एन अंडरस्टैंडिंग दैट आई वांट टू अराइव एट टुगेदर विद द पीपल ऑफ माय कंट्री, विद द यूथ ऑफ माय कंट्री. And that's why Agla Varka, the Partition podcast. Thank you.
आपने जो लाहौर के बारे में कहा, I think every Punjabi would identify with it to some extent, if not a lot. As a fellow Punjabi, I understand what you were saying. It resounds with me. And जो आपने कहा कि शायद मुझे ऐसा लगा कि किसी ने मेरा नाम बदल दिया. You know, we are always looking for our own identities, and it's interesting to see how something that happened 75 years ago, our independence, our partition, it resounds with us. It has consequences, it has lives, it has afterlives, and that stays with a lot of us, because Punjab mein ye jo ek separation and ye it's this feeling is prevalent. It's a feeling that a lot of us know, and even as third generation, there is something that we would have heard, a story from our grandparents, कि हाँ हम जानते थे कि कोई लाहौर से आया था या हम लाहौर से आए थे. So thank you for sharing that, and I want to move next to Ishan and ask you the same thing. How did Karwan start? And as someone who is doing who's done an undergraduate or a master's and is interested in academic history, with the kind of conversations that you have with our leading academics, our historians, it was so exciting for me. And 2019 mein to COVID uh, us time shuru hi bas hone wala tha, and it was for a lot of us a chance to be part of conversations, to listen to people that we wouldn't have otherwise thought that we could be doing, at least from our own homes. So please tell us more.
Thank you, Sharika. And yeah, so it was also a response, as Mani sir also mentioned. It was a response of the ghettoization of history. We have ghettoized history in a sense that we have made it very limited to a classroom, in a closed classroom where you are asked to remember dates. So it was a response to that approach of history. So we thought we'll bunk classes and we'll explore the heritage sites of Delhi. And that's how it started with heritage walks initially, our caravan. It was not me only, it was my class, the whole class. Because without that non corporation movement that we led in our classroom, caravan was not possible at all. So I think they all deserve the credit. But then the pandemic came, as you said. March 2020 was the month when ASI released a circular that they are closing down all the monuments because there were 5 cases in India at that time. So they said, we won't take a chance and we are closing down all the monuments. And that's when I thought, let's start something with our heritage walk leaders. There were 5 heritage walk leaders at that time. And Manisa just had one session with us in February. So he was one of the first 5 speakers of Karwan online lecture series that we called it Learning at Home series. But after that, I think there was also an attack on the academic history that maybe motivated us to have academic historians to give responses to the issue. So we had the honor of hosting, I think, mostly all the leading historians of our times, including Irfan Saab, Romila Thapar, others who are repeatedly attacked for doing what they have to do as a historian, the duty of a historian to question. And I think that led to Carvan to whatever it is today. And I am very happy that people find it valuable. They still listen to it, and I hope it will be a useful resource for many young people, young generations, because today is the time. It's the 75th year, and we are still, following the same old 1920s theories of two nation and whatever that is the prevalent, unfortunately, the prevalent attitude of our citizens. And it's not the anybody, we can't blame anybody. It's our thing to take, and I think it's from us that the change would start. So my take is an academic change. People could go to any other changes, but I'll stick to the academic change and history, because history shapes us, it shapes the future.
ईशान, जैसे आपने कहा कि क्लासरूम डेट्स, हम में से बहुत लोगों को ऐसा लगता है कि हिस्ट्री है तो बोरिंग है, ये डेट याद करनी पड़ेगी, ये नाम याद करने पड़ेंगे, स्पेशली थ्रू आउट स्कूल. एंड is that a misnomer? Is that something that you absolutely Disagree with?
Absolutely, and E.H. Carr has written in his book What is History that don't make a fetish out of the dates. Dates are important, but they are not history in its entirety. And I was watching Naseem the other day, just last night, there was a screening in Delhi of Saeed Mirza's Naseem, where the school teacher says, you know, बड़े बड़े प्रोफेसरों को भी डेट याद नहीं होती, हमें तो रटनी पड़ती हैं. So that's what we do. We just ratify the dates because dates are secondary to, and that's why people think that it's boring, because we teach it like that. We say this year Babur came to India, this year India got independence. But how Babur came to India, how India got independence is always the secondary question. So I think we have to reverse the process.
तो अगर हिस्ट्री डेट्स नहीं है तो हिस्ट्री क्या है? What all is history? And I would love for any one of you to come in and give me your thoughts on that and respond to maybe what Ishan said.
No, I would agree with Ishan. Sorry, I'm jumping the queue perhaps, but I would agree with Ishan. And mind you, these conversations that historians were having, that it's not just about remembering dates. These conversations in India at least started in the 1960s itself, because uh, Professor Harbans Mukhia, because I love talking about that paper. He wrote about communalization of Indian history, and then this was in 1968. This was a lecture that he had given on All India Radio, and on that, a paper was also written and published in 1969. So in 1969 itself, Professor Mukhia was saying that we need to move away from these great men theories and looking at history from the point of view of these various conquerors, and instead we need to look at history in a more wholesome way, where we are looking at societies, systems, and processes, and all of that. So that, unfortunately, that message has not yet reached the wider audience, which is why you would often hear very ahistorical claims and people sharing screenshots on social media where they're saying, oh, look, so and so dynasty and so king was so cruel, because you have the evidence here. Instead of looking at the context, and instead of understanding how all those works were written and why they were written, what were the motivations, and ज़माने की court politics क्या थी, और कैसे बाद के historians ने, हमारे ज़माने के historians ने कैसे उन चीज़ों को समझा है. So there's absolutely no effort that is made, at least in what is called as public history. इसमें एंड हिस्ट्री इज ए सब्जेक्ट जिसमें सबको लगता है कि हमारे पास एक ओपिनियन है, और हम चाहते हैं कि लोग उसको सुने और समझे और फिर इसको माने भी. हमें इससे कोई लेना देने नहीं है कि वो एकेडमिकली साउंड है या नहीं. सो इट इज दैट सॉर्ट ऑफ सब्जेक्ट जहाँ पे इंजीनियर्स, डॉक्टर्स, हर किसी को लगता है कि हम एक एक्सपर्ट हैं हिस्ट्री पे. तो इन मेनी वेज एक डेमोक्रेटाइजेशन हुआ है इस पर्टिकुलर सब्जेक्ट का, but at the same time जिस तरीके से होना चाहिए था उस तरीके से हो नहीं पाया है. यूनिवर्सिटी स्पेसेस में अभी भी इनफैक्ट बहुत आगे बढ़ चुकी है conversations, because people have abandoned all these great men theories, and this whole barbarian approach of understanding history वो खत्म हो चुका है. But for some reason we have not been able to communicate that to the wider audience. तो I think वहाँ पे challenge है, और उसमें मैं तो बिल्कुल इत्तेफाक रखता हूँ ईशान ने जो कहा. लेकिन अनफॉर्चुनेटली हमारे यहाँ पे हम लोगों ने ये समझ लिया है कि हिस्ट्री के ज़रिए वी विल बी एबल टू सॉल्व आवर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स, और जो पुराने जो है हमारे इश्यूज हैं इन सबको सुलझाने के लिए हम हिस्ट्री का इस्तेमाल करेंगे. आई थिंक that is a very wrong approach, because history definitely informs the past, informs the present, but we should not be looking only at the past and trying to move ahead, because फिर पलट के आप देख के अगर आगे बढ़ेंगे तो फिर you are heading towards trouble. तो वो नहीं होना चाहिए, I think. And yeah, I mean, I should also let others speak.
So I feel for me, personal history is intertwined, with the socio-political history of my country. this region. तो किसी भी अगर आप इंसिडेंट को समझना चाहते हैं तो आपको देखना होगा कि वो एक आइसोलेशन में एग्जिस्ट नहीं करता. फॉर एनीथिंग टू टेक प्लेस, वेदर इट्स कम्युनलिज्म or peace, there is an environment that is curated around it for that to take place. So for me, when I look back, I try to understand ki what was that environment, wo cheez kaise ho rahi thi, because there's a big question when it even comes to partition, that a society which was so pluralistic, in this region of Punjab, what led to such communalism in this region. तो वो गैप्स को अंडरस्टैंड करने के लिए, वो कॉन्टेक्स्ट को समझने के लिए, अपने आप को बेटर इन्फॉर्म करने के लिए, लुक बैक एट हिस्ट्री. नेवर अबाउट डेट्स फॉर मी, इट्स नेवर बीन अबाउट डेट्स, for me. So this is why I look back at history, so that I try and not make those mistakes in my present, and intentionally move forward and create India of our dreams, like Rabindranath Tagore says, that where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, inshallah.
Amy, ये जो personal history की आपने बात की, that please allow me to share some personal anecdotes. That is how I stuck to history. I had stories or just snippets or a lot of silences. ज़्यादा बातचीत कभी हुई या नहीं हुई about partition एक तरफ से, और दूसरी तरफ से जो कश्मीरी पंडित exodus हुआ, because I have a history of migration from both sides of my family. And for a long time, I think we grew up not consciously thinking about it, but as one grows older, आप थोड़ा और समझने लगते हैं, तो you realize that how all of that has impacted me, how these things that seem to have happened in the past, they have they continue to affect my life, and that's what brought me to histories of migration. And this leads me to think about how everyone has a claim to history, and that's because everyone has a personal connect to it. कहीं ना कहीं history के किसी पुराने किंग या कोई पॉलिसी की कभी बात होती है, तो कहीं ना कहीं वो हमसे जुड़ी होती है, हमें हमें चुभती है या हम उससे एब्सोल्युटली अग्री करते हैं. एंड दैट्स बिकॉज वी फील लाइक we have an opinion to it. It has affected us. And I agree with Mr. Mani Mukta when he says that, you don't, we were talking about this earlier as well, that you don't have to be an academic to have an opinion on history. और मुझे लगता है कि आपको academic होने की ज़रूरत नहीं है history को समझने के लिए, at least to have an interest in history. But उनसे बातचीत तो I would say definitely ज़रूरी है. All right, so let's move on to why you think history is important for us to engage with today. I know you've already answered a bit of that, but why is it important for us to engage with our heritage, our histories? And I love this word heritage, it's just something that we've inherited, हमारी विरासत. So Ishan, do you want to go ahead and give us some of your thoughts?
See, history is important because it shapes the identity. And in the world that we live in, this society that we inherited, identity plays a big role. Be it any type of identity, the gender identity, caste identity, class identity, etc., etc. And that's why you see those who do and get involved in identity politics, they give a lot of importance to history and their narrative of history, because it strengthens their point that we want a golden age, we want that golden age back in the present. And what golden age we do not know, and even they don't know, they have a different golden age than the historians golden age. But I think that's why history is important, because you have to counter that narrative which says we have to go back to the golden age. Instead, we have to say that we don't have to go back to the golden age. We have to make this age a livable age, where freedom is there, where there's equality, other opportunities, etc., etc. And to counter that, you'll have to study history, so that you could say, what you are saying is a 1920s statement, not Ashoka said it. Ashokan age is not the golden age. There was no golden age. It is a construct. So I think that's why history is important, to counter, to question. And there's the spirit of our civilization, to keep questioning, to keep bothering who is not ready to face questions.
Amy or Mr. Manimukta, would you like to come in and maybe respond or add your own thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I always agree with with the stuff that Yushan says because we've known each other for a while now. In fact, आपने heritage word का इस्तेमाल किया. And ईशान और मेरी मुलाकात तो दरअसल सबसे पहले कुतुब मीनार में हुई थी. So we both had gone there and we didn't know कि हम एक दूसरे को उस टाइम पे मतलब मिले नहीं थे, पर सोशल मीडिया पे इंटरेक्शन होता था. बट पहली दफा जो हमारी मुलाकात हुई कुतुब मीनार पे हुई. So I'd gone with my family and he'd come with some of his friends on a tour. So I think it is, and in India, I think we are one of those few countries in the world that have had very rich architectural legacy. The heritage तो tangible और intangible दोनों तरह के होते हैं, and every country has both forms of heritage, and usually people take a lot of pride in what they have inherited. हमारे में भी ऐसा है. In fact, we have so many. I mean, if you just look at Delhi alone, the figure may have changed now because over the years a lot of monuments have been lost. But if I remember it right, there were 70 से ज़्यादा centrally protected monuments in Delhi alone. Or total, I think about 3,500 monuments in Delhi. And this figure may have changed. I'm just giving you an approximate. It could be less. It could be slightly more than that. So we are really well endowed when it comes to heritage, and we also have a very rich history, in the sense that we were part of every major global event. आप किसी जंग की बात करें, आप किसी सिविलाइजेशन या फिर माइग्रेशंस की बात करें, वो सब कुछ हमारे यहाँ हुआ है. सो व्हाट वी हैव इन दिस कंट्री, जो हमारी जो तहजीब है, जो हमारी रवायतें हैं, ये सब कुछ जो है एक एक मिक्स्ड एडमिक्सचर से निकला है. बहुत सारे अलग अलग तहजीबें, संस्कृतियाँ, सब कुछ आके मिली, उसके बाद हिंदुस्तान बना, या जो हम इंडियन कल्चर बोलते हैं. हालांकि एक कोई कल्चर नहीं है, देयर आर सो मेनी डिफरेंट कल्चर्स विद इन इंडिया, बट जो हम कहते हैं वो एक एक साझा जो है हमारी विरासत. आई थिंक दैट इज समथिंग दैट शुड बी चेरिश्ड एंड सेलिब्रेटेड. और हिस्ट्री इसलिए भी इम्पोर्टेंट है बिकॉज आप एमी ने जिक्र किया क्योंकि वो पार्टीशन पे काम करती है. मैं बहुत छोटा था, बहुत ही ज़्यादा छोटा था जब तमस सीरियल आई थी दूरदर्शन पे. And so we saw it when it was aired, and I remember bits and pieces. Obviously, बहुत ज़्यादा छोटा था, and my parents always worried कि इसको ना दिख जाए पूरा सीरियल, because it was supposed to be very disturbing for children to see. तो मुझे सुला देने की कोशिश करते, लेकिन मैं चुपके से जो है सोनी की एक्टिंग करके देखता रहता था. अब बाद में when I had grown up and YouTube became popular, उसमें फिर दोबारा मैंने तमस देखी, and then it struck me that जब शुरू होता है तमस, and it starts with a very moving, एक और अब्बा करके कोई मतलब एक फीमेल वॉइस में ना, it's kind of a cry, उससे शुरू होता है और उसमें वो मैसेज आता है, those who forget the past find themselves condemned to repeat it, है ना. और आज जो हिंदुस्तान में और अक्रॉस द बॉर्डर पाकिस्तान में भी वी हैव फॉरगॉटन दैट पास्ट, एंड एक फियर इसीलिए हमेशा रहता है कि हम कहीं वही सब चीज़ें जो हैं दोबारा रिपीट ना कर दें, क्योंकि हम उसके बारे में बात नहीं करते. और हम आज़ादी को सेलिब्रेट तो करते हैं, लेकिन हमने कभी पोस्ट 47, ये पोस्ट कॉलोनियल स्टेट कैसे बना, हमने कभी इसके बारे में अच्छे से पढ़ाया नहीं शायद. और जो चैलेंजेस आए मॉडर्न इंडिया में, और जो हमारे स्ट्रगल्स रहे हैं, एक बहुत बड़े पैमाने पे हमने स्ट्रगल किया था टू यूनाइट डिफरेंट रीजन्स. कितने तो प्रिंसली स्टेट्स ही थे, तो वो सब कुछ. और उसके बाद जो फाइनेंशियल प्रॉब्लम्स रहे मॉडर्न इंडिया के, कैसे आपके जो है ये सारे इंडस्ट्रीज वगैरह आए. सो दीज आर थिंग्स दैट वी हैव नॉट रियली स्टडीड मच, और we have not appreciated the kind of struggles that we have. So अब हम अमृत महोत्सव मना रहे हैं. I think it is also a good opportunity for us to look at some of the achievements, real achievements that we have had. And if we do that, if we critically engage with the past, then we can also appreciate what we have gained so far. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. आपने तमस याद करा दिया मुझे, and I always feel so emotional when I remember the story and everything. History being alive again. In fact, in the very recent podcast episode, I talked about it that um, जैसे हमें आज़ादी मिली है ना विरासत में, we inherited it, you know, एंड हमारे पुरखों ने हमारे एंसेस्टर्स ने जो उसके लिए कुर्बानियाँ दी हैं जो लड़ाई करी है यू नो हाउ मच दे परसिस्टेड एंड फॉट फॉर इट ऑफ कोर्स ये आज़ादी मुबारक है मुझे भी आपको भी हम सबको बट व्हाट डू वी डू विद दिस इज़ अ क्वेश्चन एंड वेयर डू वी गो फ्रॉम हियर इज़ अनदर क्वेश्चन और हिस्ट्री जो जब हम इनहेरिटेड हिस्ट्री की बात करते हैं तो एटलीस्ट फॉर पीपल ऑफ पंजाब और आई कैन स्पीक फॉर माई सेल्फ विदाउट जनरलाइजिंग इट कि देर इज़ ऑल्सो दिस दर्द की पोटली यू नो जो पीठ पे लदी हुई है कभी कभी इतनी भारी हो जाती है कि उठाई भी नहीं जाती हटाई भी नहीं जाती. So this is when I talk about intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma is one very big symptom sign of history being alive in you and in your generation, the present generation. And I look at it and I see that we have never even had a collective space, whether tangible or intangible, to even process the grief of partition. And we have never even had, there was no holding, no space for that grief to be released. So no wonder we carry it, and you know, it's very sensational, it's very sensorial what we remember or what we carry forward now. And I think about how it took us like 70 years to even build a partition museum. It took us 75 years for Akal Takht Sahib to even, you know, say that let's organize a memorial prayer for peace of the people who died, you know, for their souls. And बहुत मुबारक है, सारी दोनों चीज़ें बहुत मुबारक है. हमें इतने साल लग गए just to arrive at this simple thing, you know. So that's why it is very important that we look at history and we do better, so that we're not condemned to repeat the mistakes and the gaps that happened, things that, you know, just went wrong, so that we take charge now and don't repeat those mistakes and don't let the history repeat itself. Yeah, that's my bit.
ये जो intergenerational trauma की बात and where do we go from here? These are questions that are so alive. These are questions that we must be thinking about. Where do we go from here? What's next? And what would you tell us? What do you see starting from the space of heritage, Indian culture? आज आजकल इतनी exciting books, इतने नए projects, people coming up and talking about very passionately about things that we feel are history. What do you see is happening today? Are young people excited, curious, interested, disinterested? Is it just because we have the technology that supports us today that we are having these conversations at this scale? What's happening? What do you think we're seeing today? Ishan?
Sure, sure, okay. So should I was trying to think of an answer when you asked me. Uh, See, if I'll answer, I lose my audience on Caravan. So, but it's good that young people are taking some interest in history. But what kind of history? You said that we have the internet, but with internet came WhatsApp. With WhatsApp came a different narrative of history, which is served every day, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. You know, 2 episodes of history you get every day on your family WhatsApp. And some people who are especially engineers and other professionals, they tend to get into that kind of history because they unfortunately uh, because they were reading other books like H.C. Verma and other great scientists. They forgot to read history books. And because of the disconnect with academic world and the narrative world on WhatsApp, there you have a different kind of audience for history. So would you call them interested in history? Yes, of course they are interested. That's why they are reading those messages, believing in those messages. But are they into the real kind, the authentic kind of history? That's a question that they should ask themselves. And who is going to introduce them to authentic history? Those are the NCRT books, but NCRT is again governed by a set of people who are deleting some chapters of history from the textbooks. That again is a challenge that you see, where should we go? Amy said, where should we go from here? With the absence of very important chapters like the Mughals from it, how can you erase Mughals from the Indian history? How could you erase partition, or you glorify partition as a partition horror remembrance day? What kind of narrative are we building around us? I think that's a worry for young people like me, my colleagues who are studying history, who are not studying history, who are enjoying their WhatsApp status. But I think there would be a time when they'll have to think that where have we arrived. And to save from that, I think books like Mani Sir's, where he contemporized Akbar in some sense in the contemporary time, or books like, say, uh, Romila's Past as Present, Romila Thapar's Past as Present, where she talks about the Ramayana syndrome, Mahabharata syndrome, etc. Upinder Singh's Ancient India Culture of Contradictions. I think these kind of sets of books, uh, which are highly readable. You do not have to be an expert or a BA history student to read them. I think these literature books should be promoted among young people, and they should be forwarded as PDFs on WhatsApp if that's allowed legally, so that they could read. 8 p.m. you send one chapter, 8 a.m. you send the other chapter. So something like that I think would help. But they are really interested. They are really interested. Young people are interested in history.
Ishan, that's such a wonderful suggestion. It's about reclaiming those spaces where, say, misinformation is spread and then actually, in an organized manner, responding to it, maybe making history more accessible and, relevant like you do. Your entire work is about that. But I think it's a wonderful idea.
But I must say sorry to the publishers. Please don't do that. They won't be able to earn money.
You know, my complaint with a lot of this academic publishing is that most of the time it is not easily accessible, because there are some books which you need, and these are absolute essentials, something new which has been done, new research, a new finding, and then you would go to Amazon and you will see that book is priced at rupees 8,000, rupees 10,000, which is a very prohibitively expensive book to have. So that also means that you are not getting that information. So that I think that information should be made accessible, and it should be readily available. And but then it is also true that there has been tremendous penetration of technology in the last 5 years at least. Internet bandwidths have increased. So many websites are now available, search engines, and even those pirate websites where you can actually procure PDFs of books. But then, despite that, I mean, an audience which is glued to scholarly conversations, they are accessing that. The vast majority of the people who are very interested in the past and then who get easily excited, they still don't have access to that information, despite internet being so easy. And in fact, in India, we have all the cheapest internet services, because my connection in Canada is very expensive. And I used to get the kind of data that I get on a daily basis here, like on a monthly basis, I used to have in India on a daily basis. Okay, so that's the kind of difference that you have. The data is very, very expensive over here. And in India, it's very cheap, it's very affordable. And despite that, we are not being able to use or make use of that to inform us or to arm ourselves with that academic knowledge. So I think that there needs to be more dissemination of information, and I think the media, the mainstream media, can play a very important role, which unfortunately it is not playing, because we have kind of assumed that the general public is not interested in reading anything by spending more than 3 or 5 minutes on an article. Anything longer than that is completely cast aside. So I think that mindset also needs to change. So I would say that we should learn definitely from the past, and history is something that really helps us to understand how far we have come. So, and especially when we are celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, I think it is very important that we understand and accept and embrace our own past, not feel ashamed by parts of it, and not find or try to find a golden past, because there's never been a golden past कभी भी. अब तो हर दौर में जो पावर में है, जो जिसके पास पैसा है, उसके लिए हर एज गोल्डन एज रहा है. So, but for everyone else, it's been pretty depressing. So I think we need to stop looking at history as a tool to feel proud of, or to feel or to look at past in terms of a glorious past or a depressing past. I think it informs our present, and it should help us in making choices for the future. But we should really know how to move ahead, and we should not be obsessed about the past. This obsession with the past, a certain kind of past, is very harmful. So when I wrote the book, and I keep telling this to people, that I still think Akbar is relevant, but unfortunately, that's an unfortunate fact. I think a 16th century emperor should not have been relevant in the 21st century. But we are looking back at him, looking back at this period, and we are trying to reclaim bits and pieces of that past, simply because we think that our present is very depressing. So we need to move ahead from that. We need to learn that, okay, this is something that has shaped us, but at the same time, we just need to forge ahead. I mean, yeah, that would be my take on this.
So, from WhatsApp forwards to accessibility or inaccessibility, tech has left us with a lot of challenges, but it's also left us with possibly some roots. Maybe what Karma does with its online conversations, and what Amy's doing with the podcast, and what we're doing here today, having this conversation. Maybe these could be spaces where we do engage in more conversations. We do make history in some way more accessible. Amy, uh, was that something you thought about when you started the podcast, when you started Agla Varka? Was it a way you felt was maybe different than WhatsApp forwards, but
Hmm. Hmm. So, especially in context of the podcast, I thought that the first few episodes surely are about understanding and remembering what happened in the partition, because even that remembrance or that memory is sort of erased and it's not talked about, and it's just missing from the mainstream conversation. So I didn't want to take part in that erasure or absence of conversation on the partition. So the first few episodes are dedicated to remembering, but the name and the concept Agla Varka is going to the next page. So my intention with the podcast is to then create a space where cross-border conversations and those meeting points can be generated. एक ऐसा एक ऐसी स्पेस मिले जहाँ पर लोग आकर ये जान सकें कि how similar they are, because it's very easy to hate who you don't know, who you don't understand. But एक दफ़ा जब आप अपने से मुख्तलिफ किसी इंसान के साथ बैठकर बात करते हैं, उसको सुनते हैं, बड़ा मुश्किल हो जाता है उसको उसको अलग से देखना, एंड कमिंग फ्रॉम द लैंड ऑफ बुल्ले शाह, जो जिन्होंने लिखा था कि गल समझ लग गई ते रौला की, राम रहीम ते मौला की. So if you're really so connected with whoever your God is, whatever your religion is, if it's so much inherited, and if it's so much present in your heart, then you wouldn't see a difference, and you would never ever want to harm another person or any creation of your God, for that matter, whether it's a human being who's different in terms of caste, creed, language, nation, whatever. You would see that oneness, like So I, with this podcast, I am trying to build a space जहाँ पर हम देख सकें कि how we come together, and how we can be more inclusive, because मुझे नहीं लगता कि किसी को भी, when they come to meet me, they should change anything about themselves. I think they should come as they are. And I want to have my heart so open and so wide to welcome them in their, wholeness. Similarly, if I'm going somewhere to meet someone, I would want that I don't have to, hide something about me, that I should come out in the open with my flaws, with my mistakes, and with my glory and beauty. Similarly, with these two nations, we have made mistakes, and we have done things which I hope we would have done differently, but that's gone. So now in Agla Varka, where do we go from here is the answer that I'm looking for. And this is the answer that I'm looking for collectively, not individually. Because we're very diverse and there has to be a voice that is coming from every side, and together we have to go forward. So Agla Varka is about moving forward. It's less about, getting stuck in the past. It's more about कि यार नहीं, अब कहाँ जाएं, अब क्या करना है, उसके बारे में बात होनी है. Yeah.
So, any suggestions for our audiences, our viewers who are interested in history, who are looking to hear more, and they want to do it maybe other than WhatsApp forwards? What can we do? How can we probably even use WhatsApp to our advantage to have these conversations in a better way rather than spreading misinformation? I think I would definitely suggest Amy's podcast. I would suggest Ishan's conversations. I would suggest that please maybe explore more conversations like we are having today with Mr. Manimukta and Ishan and Amy. And also, I want to ask you all, what do you want to see? Like Amy said, that's Agla Varka is what I want to see next. What do you want to see happening in the space of Indian heritage and culture and the way we talk about it and what we take away from it in the next, say, 25 years?
Yeah, I think it's a very long time, but yeah, let's because the Prime Minister has told us that in the next 25 years we need to do a lot of things in his address today. I suppose conservation of conservation of heritage is an important thing to do. Um, the Archaeological Survey of India, as well as other heritage conservation bodies, have been crying for years for funds, and they say that, and many of our museums are in a pitiable condition. And in terms of collection, Indian museums have rare treasures. I mean, there are very few museums globally that can actually match the National Museum or the Indian Museum in Calcutta. But then countries elsewhere have devoted funds. They have conserved things properly. They have tried to highlight their diversity, their richness, and all of that. And with the limited things that they have. For instance, if I have to give the example of Canada here, the museum in Vancouver, for instance, I mean, if you look at the kind of artifacts that they have, it's actually very limited because they don't have a very long history, right? So they have actually one gallery devoted to the First Nations. Then they showcase how their signboards have evolved, how the signboards were in the 1960s. There's an entire gallery on that. On surfing boards, various surfing boards, on the Second World War, on the kind of artifacts that all the early settlers brought in with them. So these are the kind of things. If you go to the United States, you will find that they have kept preserved suitcases of some of the very early migrants to that country, and you get to understand their history through these suitcases, right? The various forms of the various kinds of luggage that people brought with them. And we in National Museum in Delhi, every time I go there, I mean, it surprises me, it amazes me with the kind of artifacts that it has. But then there is not much information which is readily available, and there are not enough guides who will tell you that okay, this particular piece is important because it was found here. I mean, you just have that typical bare minimum information. which is posted on that. So I think that should be conserved. There should be a proper mechanism to encourage conservation of heritage and preservation of sites of memory. At the same time, when it comes to history, we should embrace more academic history and read authentic books. And to our audiences, I would say every time you receive a WhatsApp forward, immediately Google up and try to find that information and see what historians, genuine historians who have taught in the universities and who are well known, what they have said about these topics. I think that is the way to go forward. Others can obviously share their own ideas.
Sure, should I go next? Sure. So yes, all that Manisha said is very relevant, important. But also we can't study history in the absence of the context, which is the present, because present and the past is connected with each other. As you know, वो एक ad आता था फेविकोल का जिसमें they used to stick the furniture. So it's the that sticking glue and the furniture, the past and the present. You can't distinguish between the two. So 25 years, when I'll be 40, 47, 48, and India would be celebrating 100 years. So I'm more than 50, 60. It's 60 times older than me. But I think at that time we must learn to have conversations. We have stopped having conversations. We have, as I'll repeat that word, ghettoized ourselves, our thinking. We want to impress ourselves by saying, we know everything, the other person doesn't know anything. And what we say is the right thing to say. And what he's saying, I'm not ready to hear. I think we have to change that attitude. And it's very prevalent in the young people, unfortunately. And because we have learned from the older politicians. So I think 25 years from now, we should be more open to ideas. And heritage, of course, hopefully they'll have. I was reading somewhere that some of the heritage sites are untraceable. So I don't know what is happening with those heritage sites. Where are they moving? Are they leaving India or going to the other side? I don't know what is happening with the heritage sites, where how they are untraceable. Hopefully there will be a more strategic planning of securing our heritage sites and having and understand as our heritage, not their heritage and my heritage. Every heritage site is our heritage, be it a mosque, be it a temple, be it a tomb, be it a whatever. So I think that acceptance would do a really good work for history, for heritage. And I'll end with some words of Faiz Sahab. And then Amy would be who is much creative than me, would read out her poetry, I hope. So I'll just read out a few lines of Faiz, Ahmad Faiz, who is rather very much rejected in India today, but I think his words stand true for our times. And this is a hope for 25 years from today, which when we'll celebrate 100 years. And I hope MASH project would invite us then, when we'll be in 40s, 50s, 60s, to have this discussion again. So the nazm is Subh Azadi. I think all of you know the nazm. The opening lines, ये दाग दाग उजाला ये शब गजीदा सहर, वो इंतजार था जिसका ये वो सहर तो नहीं, ये वो सहर तो नहीं जिसकी आरजू लेकर चले थे यार के मिल जाएगी कहीं ना कहीं, फलक के दश्त में तारों की आखिरी मंजिल, कहीं तो होगा शबे सुस्त मौज का साहिल, कहीं तो जाके रुकेगा सफीनाए गम दिल, जवां लहू की पुरस्रार शाहराहों से चले जो यार तो दामन पे कितने हाथ पड़े, दयारे हुस्न की बेसब्र ख्वाबगाहों से पुकारती रही बाहें बदन बुलाते रहे, बहुत अजीज थी लेकिन रुखे सहर की लगन, बहुत करीन था हसीना ने नूर का दामन, सुबुक सुबुक थी तमन्ना दबी दबी थी थकन, सुना है हो भी चुका है फिरा के जुल्म तो नूर, सुना है हो भी चुका है विसाल मंजिलो गम, बदल चुका है बहुत अहले दर्द का दस्तूर, नशाते वस्ल हलाल व अजाब हिज्र हराम, जिगर की आग नज़र की उमंग दिल की जलन, किसी के चाराए हिजरा का कुछ असर ही नहीं। कहाँ से आई निगारे सबा किधर को गई, अभी चरागे सारे राह को कुछ खबर ही नहीं। अभी गिराने शब में कमी नहीं आई, न जाते दीदा ओ दिल की घड़ी नहीं आई, चले चलो की वो मंजिल अभी नहीं आई। I think 25 years from now, I hope we'll reach some destination. We are still hopeless, unfortunately, seeing the present situations, but hopefully there is a hope somewhere that we'll reach to that manzil. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ishan.
Thank you, Ishan, for reminding us कि वो मंजिल अभी नहीं आई, and we really have to, you know, work towards it and walk towards it. So thank you so much. जाते जाते, my work is all about more peaceful, more human connection kind of a world. तो मेरी उम्मीद यही है कि with our neighbors, whether it's Pakistan or it's the person next to me, a person who's from different, you know, state, caste, creed, religion, that I'm able to be, have a equal and safe relationship with them. And I would like to end my part of the conversation with reading Dark, one of the letters, if the time permits. And yeah, shall I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Dear Lahore, how are you? Let's trip in time, shall we? I was 14 years old, half tucked in a small bed next to my mother's in this huge hospital of Amritsar, trying to tune into radio stations to keep me company, when I first stumbled upon the fearless, seditious radio waves of yours. मैं हैरान थी और बेहद खुश भी कि इन तरंगों को नहीं रोक पाई वागा अटारी की कोई सरहद। मुझे यकीन था इसके बाद अगर मुझे जीना है तो इसी तरह आवारा, बेबाक और बेखौफ जीना है। After that night, your radio sang songs of my heart, and I went to bed with City FM 89 putting me to sleep. This morning, I woke up to Lahore radio paying tributes to Mehdi Hassan, so I quickly took out a postcard from my collection and I wrote, किस किस को बताएंगे जुदाई का सबब हम, तू मुझसे खफा है तो ज़माने के लिए आ. Sent it to GPO Lahore and I wondered what will happen when it reaches you, Lahore. Will you write me back? देखो ना, मैं सरहदों को सराब कराई हूँ. फराज ने कहा था, सो दोस्ती का हाथ बढ़ा आई हूँ. लाहौर विल यू होल्ड इट? एक दोस्त ने फ़ोन पर कहा कि एमी जुलाई में नाटक लेकर लाहौर जा रहे हैं, तुम्हारे लिए कुछ ले आए क्या? मैंने कहा, लाहौर ही ले आ सकते हो क्या? सो ही लाफ्ड एंड आई सेड, नो नो नो, आई डू नीड अ फ्यू थिंग्स. थोड़ी मिट्टी जिलानी पार्क की, जिसे मैं रोज़ गार्डन की हर क्यारी में छिड़का देना चाहती हूँ. थोड़ा पानी रावी का, जिसे सतलुज में मिलाकर मैं पंजाब को उसके खो चुके मायने लौटाना चाहती हूँ. कान लगाकर सुनना वहाँ भगत सिंह, राजगुरु, सुखदेव के इनकलाब के नारों की गूंज है, मैं उसे अपने गले में समा लेना चाहती हूँ. एक गांव है मेरे दारजी का, जहाँ मैं कभी नहीं गई. वहाँ के किसी बुजुर्ग के हाथ का साया अपने सर पर उड़ा लेना चाहती हूँ. नूरजहाँ की गज़लें, कुछ अनसुने लोकगीत, उन्हें भी अपनी ज़बान पर सजा के ले आना, मैं भी उन्हें गुनगुनाना चाहती हूँ. अल्लामा इकबाल की कब्र से कोई फूल भी ले आना, मैं उसे सुरजीत पातर की किताब में सजाना चाहती हूँ. सुना है अंदरूनी लाहौर की बाज़ गलियाँ इतनी तंग हैं कि अगर एक जानिब से मर्द और दूसरी तरफ से औरत आ रही हो तो दरमियान सिर्फ निकाह की गुंजाइश बचती है. मैं उस गुंजाइश को भी आजमाना चाहती हूँ. इससे पहले मैं कुछ और कहती, मेरे दोस्त ने मुझे टोकते हुए कहा, समझ गए मी, समझ गए, लाहौर ही ले आना पड़ेगा, लाहौर ही ले आऊँगा. So tell me, Lahore, will you come? I'll keep the door open. I'll lay the table with homemade aloo paranthas. Will you come and dine with me? क्योंकि इधरले पंजाब ਦਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਤੇ ਉਧਰਲੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਹਾਲੇ ਵੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਦਾਦੀ ਦੇ ਸੰਦੂਕ 'ਚ ਪਏ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਰੀਆਂ ਬਿਸਤਰਿਆਂ ਵਰਗਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਿਸ ਤੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਪੂਰੀ ਮਲਕੀਅਤ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ. So tell me, Lahore, अपनी जायदाद का लुत्फ उठा लें. ये जो सारी लकीरें हायल हैं दरमियान, इनको मिटा लें. अटारी की लोहे से बनी सख्त ऊंची दीवारों में हम दोनों कुछ मासूम बोलती खिड़कियां बना लें, in hope of a day when this letter will no longer need an international postal stamp. चंडीगढ़ तो लाहौर वाली एमी। शुक्रिया।
Shukriya, Amy. Thank you so much. And a final word from Mr. Manimukta. Would you want to leave us with a message looking towards the future? What do we leave our youth, our present, our country, the hope we leave them with today?
देखिए, जो हमने तो आज़ादी की लड़ाई नहीं लड़ी, लेकिन जिन्होंने लड़ी थी और हमारे पूर्वज, जब मैंने तो मेरी दादी से बहुत सारे किस्से कहानियाँ मैंने सुने हैं, और उन्होंने पार्टीशन भी देखा था, हालांकि इट वाज ऑन द ईस्टर्न साइड, जिसके बारे में बहुत ज़्यादा बोला नहीं जाता। लेकिन आई थिंक हमने the skeptics of the time, at least from the West, they thought that we will not even last 20 years as a free country. और हम 75 years तक आ पहुँचे हैं और आगे भी चलेंगे। हम सबको साथ में लेके चलें तो अच्छा रहेगा, क्योंकि हमने यूनिटी इन डाइवर्सिटी, हमारे कल्चरल डाइवर्सिटी को सेलिब्रेट किया है, और हमारे आज वज़ीर आज़म ने भी आज लाल किले के फसील से उसी चीज़ को दोहराया है कि इस डाइवर्सिटी को सेलिब्रेट करना है, यही हमारी स्ट्रेंथ है। और इसी डाइवर्सिटी को हम सेलिब्रेट करके अगर आगे बढ़ते चले गए तो फिर हम एक बेहतरीन मुल्क साबित होंगे, और जो भी हमारे मुल्क में अभी अख्तिलाफ़ात हैं लोगों में, वो सारे दूर हो जाएंगे वक्त के साथ साथ। और यही मेरा विश्वास है और भरोसा भी है कि हम में इतनी कुव्वत तो है कि हम एक बेहतरीन हिंदुस्तान आगे भी हम बना पाएंगे, और जो आज़ादी हमें मिली है विरासत में, इसको कायम रख पाएंगे, और दुनिया के मुल्कों में हमारा शुमार हमेशा रहेगा कि एक सक्सेसफुल मुल्क हिंदुस्तान था, है और हमेशा रहेगा। बस यही मैं कहना चाहूँगा।
Thank you, Mr. Manimukta. And with that, we close today's panel. I hope that our audience had an absolutely engaging conversation with us. That's what we hope for tomorrow. More and more conversations. और आपने देख ही लिया है हिस्ट्री, पास्ट, हेरिटेज की बात करते हुए कहाँ हम आइडेंटिटी से व्हाट्सएप पर पहुंच गए. The past is around us. The past is here, alive amongst us. And we have a lot to look forward to, a lot of conversations and a lot of work to do. थैंक यू। सबको स्वतंत्रता दिवस की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं।